Hey, what's going on, Hector? We're back for another week. You doing all right?
I'm doing great, Kirk. How about yourself?
Oh, not too bad. Well, Hector, I was thinking about a topic for this week, and I'm not going to tell you what it is. I just want to start with a question for you. What has been one of the biggest challenges for you implementing value pricing in your business?
Oh, wow. That's a big question. Um, so I will start by saying that I am not a value pricing purist. So what I mean by that is maybe I haven't reached perfection and respected all the general rules of value pricing. But my biggest challenge at first was assuming that this is a sort of a mechanical technique, where this is just something that you charge differently or charge more. And I failed the first time because I thought that value pricing was simply just charging fixed fees. And it wasn't until maybe a couple of years later, after studying and reading into it, that value pricing was really just a mindset of being value driven and being more cognizant about how we create value for our customers. So when that happened, the easy part was working with new customers, right? Because we had a different approach. We didn't have any bad habits. We have a clean slate. And then I was able to apply all the value mindset concepts to new customers with no issue. But then what continues to be my struggle and has been the biggest struggle, to answer your question directly, has been with existing customers. Like, when's the right time to convert them over? How do we convert them over? Um, what a conversation looks like, which is significantly different than new customers. I mean, I love new customers, especially the way I market, because they come in really excited to come talk to me. So those are easy to have a value conversation with. But for the ones that were with me when I started my practice for the first time 10 years ago, those seem to be a little bit harder to have that conversation with, because it's just like they know me better, or they've seen me grow. And I don't know if it's a relationship thing or fear, but I think that has been and continues to be my biggest challenge. Why? You got a solution for it?
Well, what you just articulated is actually one of the things that I get the most questions about is how do we transition existing customers over? And so I'm really not surprised that you found that to be a challenge because a lot of other people do. And I did as well when I made the transition in my business. You made a great point that it is a mindset, but just because you've made a mindset shift doesn't mean you have to articulate the mindset shift that you've made to your customer. In other words, you don't have to call your customer up and go, hey, guess what? We're switching to value pricing this week. Really, all you need to tell the customer is, look, I've decided to do business differently because I think it is better for you. And then you need to be able to articulate about 2 to 3 reasons why it's better for them. And there are quite a few more than 2 or 3. So just pick your favorite. But for example, the first one I love to mention is just the fact that I think you ought to be able to pay for our services just like you buy other things in the store. You ought to be able to make a buying decision before we do the work. In other words, we want to give you a price, a fixed price for a particular engagement. We're going to define the scope of that. And then the only way there's going to be some type of price change is if there's a change. The idea that a customer can buy from you with certainty, meaning certainty based on price, I think is a huge thing. And then you can go on into other things. And I don't want to make this episode about all those advantages. I just wanted to give one example on how you might explain it. But then the second thing, and you mentioned it also, is looking for that opportunity to switch a customer, to transition a customer. And I really prefer the word transition because a transition is kind of something that happens along a journey. It happens over time. It's not just like flipping a light switch. So the best time I think to help a customer make a transition, an existing customer, is when there is a new project to begin, or when there is some type of natural stop and then a natural start. One of the most common times within the accounting and bookkeeping world is annual renewals, because many professionals have their customers on an annual agreement for the standard things that they have to do month over month, quarter over quarter, year over year. A lot of times those things revolve around payroll, tax, etc. So I think that's a great time to do it. And that's what I'd like to dive into. So let me throw another question at you. What if you were able to give 2 or 3 months consideration to switching some customers over, and you were able to plan for it? How would you approach that? Or what questions do you have about how you might approach it?
Well, I like to go back to something you said earlier, which is presenting the reasons why it should make sense to the customer without having to get to too much details, which is we price up front, and you should be able to know what you're buying up front by knowing a price. And obviously that sounds fine from a salesmanship perspective. And I don't think you're going to get too much pushback on that. I think everybody will agree that that's how they want to consume products or consume services. But one of my challenges is in having this conversation during that transition stage, where we're going to say, look, we have a new philosophy, or we have a new system, or we want to work differently. And again, I'm not saying that we should say that verbatim, and you said that we should be careful with using the justifications. But I think one of the biggest fears is that at any time that we want to change somebody's paradigm, that we feel obliged that we have to justify it, that we have to explain the reasons why, that the other person needs to meet us at the same logical and spiritual point that we are, that made that decision or made that mindset shift. So I think there's an enormous amount of pressure for us to feel that we have to justify it before we talk about it. So I would like to, first thing I'd like to understand from you is, is it okay to have that fear, or feel that we have to have that justification? Are there some maybe internal techniques or external techniques on how we don't have to go through the process of justification? Because one of the biggest issues that I've had 4 or 5 years ago when I started this is when I go down the path of justification and the customer decides to say it's going to take you longer or take you less time, because this always happens where you're talking about, hey, we're going to work a different way, and the customer is trying to protect their money, right? Because they're saying, oh God, here it comes. He wants to, push something new down my throat. They're always going to push back to say, look, over time, we're getting better and better, especially if you're a good accountant. We're getting better and better. Our books are cleaner. We understand more. It's less messy. And the magic hammer comes down, it's taking you less time. So I think that bringing that justification, it's a huge Pandora's box, because then it opens up the customer to talk about how long something takes. And I don't know if we have enough time in our conversation to even figure out how to derail that or debunk the whole time element, because we're making that transition. Remember, the customer, it's used for you to track time or justify your prices based on your time. And now you're trying to do a 360 and say, well, time doesn't matter anymore, and somehow expect the customer to take that conversation lightly. So what do you think about that, the fear of all that comes into play when you're having that conversation?
So, you mentioned that it's a paradigm shift for some reason, and I really need to think about this to better articulate it, because I haven't actually put specific words to it before. But this idea that there's kind of this internal need or this internal motivation that if you've made a paradigm shift, to tell your customers about it. And actually, I think I know what it is. If you've made the paradigm shift, you're excited about it. In fact, you wouldn't make a paradigm shift. And let's define a paradigm shift is a huge shift in the underlying reason why you do something. And it's you could call it a philosophy, right? It's a huge mind shift. And so when you do that, you're not going to go through that effort unless you are excited. And so when we go through that and we're excited, we want to share it. Well, who do we want to share it with? Obviously, our customer. The reason we're excited about it is because it's in their best interest. However, it's not necessary for you to go through how you came to the paradigm shift or why you're making the paradigm shift, your own internal reasons, because the reasons that this shift is going to matter to them may be different from why it matters to you. You need to put yourself in the customer's chair and think about, why would this make sense to them? And that's why I love the example of the fact that we're going to give you a fixed price. Every customer who has worked with a consultant on an hourly basis has been frustrated by the fact that as they start the engagement, they get some type of rough estimate, and the estimate is never accurate. By the way, that's why it's an estimate and not an exact quote. But they're frustrated because most of the time it runs over. And even if you estimate high, trying not to run over, you still manage to. I mean, that's just the way it works. We could talk sometime about, kind of this self-fulfilling prophecy that things tend to take as much time as you allocate for them to take. So I think we've got to use a reason like the fact that your customer would rather buy with certainty, would rather buy with an exact price and be able to make that decision before they engage. Things like that are valuable to the customer. Maybe there's certain frustrations that they've had with your prior business model. You can articulate those, but the point is, go at it from the customer's perspective. What's in it for the customer and focus on that. The reason why you're excited about it or why you decided to do it is irrelevant, especially if it's not from their viewpoint. That's what I would say. There's that compelling urge, and I would say fight it and focus on it from the customer's perspective. And I think of it as education. Your customer, when you go to them and you say something like, hey, I want to do things differently this year than last year, it's a natural response for them to go, why? And you need to have, 2 or 3 solid reasons why. But those are not hard to come up with, especially when you start putting yourself in the customer's chair.
And if you allow me to just be the devil's advocate in this entire episode.
Go right ahead.
Because I do agree with you. But no,
you don't. You don't agree with me. You're
true.
Just say it.
I did a video. I did a video a couple of months ago, which I titled "The Power of No," and I have forgotten all about it until
or KNOW.
NO, the power of no, right?
All right.
And I have forgotten all about the video because it's one of those like random videos that occur to me at the moment. And it's not something that's very prevalent in my life. I'm not a negative person, but in the video, I stated how no, it's a great starting point of negotiation. And it came about because we were in the family chat with my family. We were talking about something that I normally would have said no to, like consistently 99% of the times I would have said no to. But if they had asked me that day, I would have said yes. And they told me, Hector, but your doctor, no. And I said, well, as a matter of fact, I got a video on that. So I showed them the video, and then we had this whole conversation about it. Long story short, the reason why I thought no was a great starting point of a conversation is because from disagreement is where the real innovation happens, right? It's from that conflict that new things, new ideas come out. Because if we're both agreeing about everything all the time, how can both of us learn from each other, especially about a topic that both of us are sort of semi-aligned and very passionate about? But I like to play the devil's advocate because I like to put myself in the shoes where I was or where I have been or where I am during all these transitions. So just give me permission to be devil's advocate, and I'll continue to be.
So I thought you were about to say, here's the reason why I think you ought to approach it different.
Right. I'm just going to disagree with you because I want to tell you about all my challenges in this process with that.
Okay. Where do you disagree?
Right. So I'm going to, where I'm going to disagree or post a challenge with you is that, it's very easy to be excited about a new business model that will be more profitable for you as a practitioner. It's very easy to be excited about just change for the sake of change, because I think change or something new is exciting, period. But when the customer is sitting on the other side and that change feels like it's going to be more expensive, right? Because most transitions to value pricing, especially because you're now stating a fixed rate, which is by definition a bigger number than your hourly rate if your work is now more than an hour long. In other words, if before you used to take whatever, 3, 4, 5 hours to do something at $100 an hour, the number that you were effectively using was 100. That was the anchoring point. And now you're saying, hey, we're going to go to a new model. We're going to talk about it. And at the end, we're going to present, let's say, a fixed price of $800, whatever happens to be. We are now effectively talking about two different numbers. And the value pricing conversation normally drives to a conversation about a bigger number. Now, I'm not saying that all value pricing means the customer's going to pay more. We probably should debunk that, and we're gonna agree on that. But that's what I'm saying. Like, you're saying that it should be easy because all you have to do is be excited about it. But again, it's very, very exciting to make more money, but maybe for the customer, it may not feel so exciting that it's going to be more expensive. So could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So I appreciate, you being willing to be contrarian, because I think that's where our audience is going to have an opportunity to learn. So I'm going to push back, because I think there's a couple of assumptions that I don't think are always true. Okay. So first of all, number one, a value price does not always mean a higher price. A value price could be a lower price. I've talked to practitioners who've been through this, who actually wind up with some customers that are actually paying less. Now, obviously you have to offer them a price that's less, but the ones I've talked to have said, look, I offered them 3 options. One of the options just happened to be, it was scaled back. I actually thought they possibly didn't need as much. And so I offered them something that was scaled back at a lower price, and they took it. They actually appreciated me bringing something to the table that actually said, look, I don't think you need all of what we've been doing. If we scale it back, here's a lower price. That can happen. Now, yes, one of the motivations for a professional to move to value pricing is that when you start pricing based on value, the prices you charge go up. Why? It's not because we're simply charging higher prices to the customer. It's because what we realize is we're providing more value, and we're not capturing a fair or reasonable portion of that value as a price or as remuneration to the professional. And so once we start looking at that equation, yes, the prices are going to go up, because most people, when they bill by the hour, they're underpricing, they're undervaluing. So if there's a perception that prices go up, it's because of that, not because we're simply increasing prices. But at the same time, so the first assumption was that the price is always going to go up. It can go down. And the second is that you even have to discuss the idea that price is going to go up or down with the customer initially. I think all you have to do is simply educate them and focus on the changes to the business model and why it's advantageous to them. I'm beginning to sound like a broken record on this, but that is really the conversation to have with your customer. You don't honestly know if the price is going to go up or down until you sit down to create 3 options. And I would argue that you can't create 3 options until you've had a value conversation. And you can't have having this part of this education process is that value conversation, right? So that's my pushback on 2 things. Price doesn't always go up, and I forgot what the second one was. Anyway, I said it. You can rewind it.
So no, that's it. And I think that was my first mistake. My first mistake is thinking that I'm walking in automatically trying to charge my client more. And it took me 3 years. I mean, this is an inside game. This is just you and your brain, your heart and your brain battling concepts until it clicks. The value conversation is not just how to figure out how to extract more from the customer. The value conversation is also to understand whether you have been servicing your customer the right way the entire time. And some of the outcomes of this value conversation will be, you know what? I just realized we shouldn't be doing business together, right? We are charging you way too much. You're not getting enough value out of what we're doing. We don't have a service offering that matches the value that price value point that you're looking for. And this is not sustainable. And at some point, this may just be negative PR for me, or it may be a point of frustration, or this beautiful relationship or friendship that we build over time is going to have consternation at some point when we have to have the tough conversation. It's one of the, this is why the power of no is so important. It's let's come up with all of our disagreements up front, so we understand what the reservations are. I've had many clients that felt like they had no choice at the moment, whatever happened to be, right? So QuickBooks support, taxes, whatever. They walked into my office, they were referred by someone, we worked with them, and we just didn't click. I had no way of really adding value to them. What they wanted, it's not what we offer. I never understood what they wanted out of us. And these value conversations have driven the conversation to, you know what? I guess it doesn't make sense for us to keep working together. And I had to go to my network, and I'm blessed with having a really big network of accountants and colleagues. And I can simply just say, I got customer A, B, and C that don't work for me. This is what their specialty is. I got these colleagues. I try to match them up, and then just smooth transition out. Because as you said earlier, the implementing value pricing may also drive you to charge less to some customers, the ones that you want to keep. But assuming that you're going to charge less, you're also going to work less. I still have some clients, very few, that we do a lot of in my opinion, a lot of pointless work. Like I think that I don't think anybody drives any value from the work that we do. But for one way, shape, or form, the client feels that piece of work is important for us to do. And when I get to them, we're going to have that conversation, and it's happened in the past, where we figure out a way for them to take that work back, take the responsibility back. You do it. Okay, we're charging you way too much for something you can do in 5 minutes. And the customer says, well, I don't know how to do it. Well, then let's do a consultation, let's do a training session, and you learn it, and it goes back to you. And then leverage us for the complicated things, leverage us for the things that we can add true value on. Basic data entry and bookkeeping, it's one of them. I so many times I try to figure out, why does the customer still want us to do basic data entry and bookkeeping? And I have staff for that. I have a team that does that. But for some clients, I just don't understand it. And I want to charge you less, Mr. Customer. I want to charge you less. Because I want to also work 80% less of what I've been working, but I'm going to charge you maybe half of what I've been charging you. And then I actually gain on my capacity increase. So value pricing, it's also, and this has been the biggest mindset shift for me. It's also about being able to work your capacity, having open capacity to be available to deliver the maximum amount of value for the customers that desire and seek and want to pay for that value. And a lot of our current clients bog us down because we count on them, because they've been our clients for years, because they're 20% of our revenue, whatever it is. It's part of our list of clients. And we're just so afraid that the value conversation may turn the other way, right? And drive us to get rid of the client rather than to keep them or increase their rates. So I think that has been another philosophical challenge I've had as well, because I love all my clients and I want to keep them and I don't want to lose them. But that is a tough conversation to have.
So, right before we hit record, so I'm going to give the audience a little peek into what goes on before we hit record. We were talking about the fact that we probably need to record 2 episodes today because occasionally, people like yourself go on vacation. So I think I know what the second one's going to be about. And it's interesting as we have dove into this topic, I thought we'd spend 5 minutes on the mindset and spend the rest on the implementation. No, we're going to spend a whole episode on mindset. We'll have to do a second episode, which will be the second one we record on implementation, because one of the things that we want to do when we change a business model, any change, but particularly a change to a business model, because when you change a business model, there's an inherent risk in affecting your livelihood, right? That's one of the reasons why there is a huge fear, because there's a huge perceived risk in changing your business model. I'm not saying there's not a risk, but I would also say that a lot of times the fear is much bigger in our mind than it is in reality. In other words, the risk is not as big as we think it is. There is a risk, but we blow the risk up because the more we think about it, the bigger the monster gets in our mind. We owe it to our existing customers to give them an opportunity to do business with us in a better way. If we realize we've not been serving them as good as we can, which I think is one of the fundamental things you realize when you do switch your business model, we owe it to them to put effort into trying to help them make the switch. That being said, not all customers will make the switch. And this is one of the things that I think ups the risk in people's mind when we talk about the mindset, is that not all your existing customers will make the switch with you. There is a certain portion of your customers that would prefer to stay with you under the old model. And you need to know how you're going to handle that in advance. Now, our advice is that you don't try to operate in two business models, ongoing for forever. I did a session at Scaling New Heights about, how do you operate two business models for maybe about a year as you're making the transition. But after, a 12 to 18 month period of time, you really should put the old business model to bed, bury it in the ground, done with it, and move on with the new one. But what about those customers who want to stay doing business the old way? Well, find somebody else that you trust, that is very capable, that has the skill set, and be able to make a referral. There's nothing wrong with, number one, some customers not staying with you. In fact, I would argue that most people I talk to that make the switch, the number of customers, here's what's ironic. Here's just where you see two things that, this does not make sense. Back from Sesame Street, one of these things is not like the other. The number of customers goes down and the revenue for the business goes up. That just sounds, no way, that there's no way, but it does happen on a regular basis. And what happens is the customers that are the best fit for you are the ones that wind up staying. A lot of times they're the ones that want to work with you more, and the ones that actually want more from you and are willing to pay you more if you will offer them more. So it's a win-win. But be prepared that there are going to be some who leave, and that's okay. That's actually a good thing. If all your customers, let me say this just occurred to me. If all your customers stay when you make the switch, you didn't make the switch. You should lose some customers when you make a business model change, because not all those customers are appropriate for the new business model. And you just need to take the time to educate all your customers, because you may be able to guess which ones will stay and which ones will leave, but ultimately you don't know. And so assume they all will stay as you educate them, but don't be surprised when some decide they want to operate under the new business model, and be prepared to make a reference to another professional who will operate under that old business model. There's nothing wrong with that. I've had customers who I referred to somebody else, and I'm still friends with the customers. It doesn't mean the personal relationship ends. It just means the business relationship changes.
And I think, you know what? I think you nailed it in the head. I think that we are in a relationship business, right? Accounting and even IT consulting, even database programming, custom software programming, the stuff that you do. It's a relationship business. And we have to seek to understand and love what our clients do from their perspective, so we can do it alongside with them. And it's hard to detach the personal from the work. And I think that a lot of times when the right thing to do, which is price our services accordingly to the value we're bringing to the table, feels like it may be counterproductive to them, because maybe they don't want to pay more, or maybe because they're getting too much of a deal, let's call it that. Then we feel bad about that. Look, I've had many clients that I don't work with anymore, and we're still friends, and I want to continue to be friends. And I have clients that have left me because I found a less expensive accountant. And I made it a point to say, my arms are open. Okay. I whatever choice you made, it's fine. My arms are open. And I got to tell you, Kirk, 80% of the times they come back. But the important thing is that they don't come back ashamed. They come back happy, saying, you know what, you're right. You're right. I'm excited to come back to you because it was true. The grass wasn't always greener. So that making that distinction between the personal relationship and the business relationship, and recognizing that both exist, both coexist, and you can also separate them when it's time to having that conversation. But I wanted to talk to you, Kirk, about specific tools, because one of the ways to feel less fear or less risk is to feel that you have a tool by your side. And value pricing is one of these things that it's very toolless, right? It's very conceptual, very spiritual, very, I would say, philosophical in some senses. And I think a lot of folks like myself, as I go through this process, and many other colleagues, we feel we don't have enough tools. And value pricing is not something you can fix with a spreadsheet. Matter of fact, I would argue that a spreadsheet would be counterproductive. But I think that the biggest, most important tool that we have is the conversation, the honest conversation, right? That's really all it is. It's the honest conversation. Is can I speak to my customer without fear of rejection, without fear of being told no, I disagree, without fear of the client leaving us or whatever? Can I have a honest conversation about, what my role is in their business, what my role is as a professional, and what my role should be, and what the customer's role should be in working with us? So can we talk about some conversational tools as we wrap this up that you would suggest that we bring? And I'll start with one, and then maybe we can go back and forth. One of the things that I like to ask whenever I do this, undergo these conversions, is I ask, hey, Mr. Customer, be honest, be transparent with me. Do you feel that you're getting all the value out of us that you could possibly get for the investment that you're making in us? And I shut up and I wait for that answer. So do you feel you're getting all the value you could possibly get from us based on the investment you're making for our services? And I just wait for the answer. And sometimes you can catch the client off guard, and sometimes the client thinks that you're tricking them into having a conversation about, whether or not they admit that we're valuable to them. And sometimes the clients will give you the keys to the kingdom and say, no, I wish you did more. And whenever they say, I wish you did more, and there's many variances for that. Like, I wish you did more could also sound like, I wish you answered the phone more often, or I wish you responded your emails quicker, or I wish I had more access to you, right? Or I wish we would speak more often before the year ends and not do post-mortem tax planning. If you give your client the open field to have that conversation with you without them feeling also the concept of rejection and what your role is, and them saying, yes, I don't think that you're doing enough for us. I think they're giving you the because then they justified your business model change. What do you think about that? And I would love to pick your brain about what other conversational tools we have available.
So I think you nailed it. The type of tool that we have at our disposal is questions. And so the more we think about the questions we can ask to help the customer tell us what they would like and what they don't like, I think is the key to helping have an effective value conversation with the customer. That being said, I don't even think we have to use the word value. In fact, I would say that, you and I, when we say value, we have a very specific context. The customer may look at us like we're using jargon. And so I would make the question even more conversational. I would say, hey, we are going to be doing business in a different way. Notice I didn't even say we're changing our business model, because again, that sounds like jargon. Just say, hey, we're going to be changing the way we do business to offer you better and better blank, or just better is fine. But before we get too far into it, I'd like to know from your perspective right now, what do we do well? What do we not do well? And then shut up. And after they say one thing, whatever it is, say, well, tell me more about that, or what else is there?
I'm going to sort of re-summarize what he said. So I think his idea was, instead of using what I said we should say is take the word value out of the equation, just to make sure that it's not this strange technical jargon type of word, and just simplify it by what do we do well and what do we not do well, or what do we do not so well. What I like about that, and I'll add some commentary to that, is if the customer gives you 2-3 things about what you do well, that's what they want more of, right? And they give you 2 or 3 things about what you not do so well, or what you don't do well. They're telling you change that, make that better, or create an opportunity to look at me as a customer in a different way. So I actually really like that. I think I would probably implement some form of that. So I think we lost Kirk. So then I'll speak to the audience in this case. We have a comment from Alexa, who's saying, my skills have increased and I'm adding more value, but I'm struggling to reprice or upprice existing clients. So Alexa, my answer to that would be that telling your client that you have more skills and telling your client that you add more value may not solve the issue. Just because the customer is going to say, well, duh, I'm a business owner. I add more value to my customers every day. I increase my skills every day. You don't see me changing my business model or charging more to my clients just because I do that. So they're going to have pushback immediately on you using that approach. I think, Alexa, the approach would be to, as Kirk says, to say we are going to do things differently that adapt more to our customers' individual needs. We would love to understand what can we do differently or better to serve you best, and just ask that. I would say that in itself, it's probably the only useful question, or the most useful question you can ask. So Alexa, I hope that answers the question a little bit. I would also say look for opportunities to at least label your services as more, because the problem is the concept of you having better skills or you adding more value is probably an internal concept. It's something that you understand, but your customer may not understand. So the only way your customer could understand it is if you have a new service, a different service, and you give it a different label, because it is the labels that allow the customer to say, oh, I see, you're offering me now B, it's not A anymore. So I think giving the new service a label, or communicating what that new service is, and it almost has to be a new service, because it can't be the improved version of the old service, just because it's so hard to frame it around it being more value. So Alexa, I hope that answers your question. And Lori asks, what happens when your best client doesn't want to switch your value proposition, or doesn't want to switch to your value-based proposal, and it actually would have saved them money? You know what, Lori? Some clients are not concerned with saving money. Some clients may be more concerned with getting less from you. And I think that if you feel that you propose something to your client that's supposed to add more value, let's say per se, add more services, add more value, and your customer says no, that means that they didn't see it from your perspective. Okay, because telling someone do this because you're going to save money assumes immediately that their motivation is saving money. And I think that a lot of accounting professionals, including myself, we fail to see our role strictly as either an expense or a cost or potentially a money saving role if we were to modify it. And sometimes that's far from the truth. I have some customers that don't speak to me all year long, but they don't speak. They only speak to me once a year, but they refer so many of their friends because they value the trust that we have built more than whatever service I do. They don't even know what I do. They just pay my bill at the end of the year, but they value that trust. And sometimes I strongly believe that sometimes we forget how valuable it is to be amongst people that you trust. How valuable it is to not have to think something twice before somebody tells that to you. How valuable it is to have the confidence that the other person has your best interest in their mind. And I think that, Lori, that's what you need to be communicating. That's the conversation that needs to happen. And then once you both agree that that is your role, is to be a person of high trust, a person that they feel confident that you have the skill sets, that you have the best interest in mind. Then after you have that, then you are ready to make a suggestion. So what I was telling Lori that I think that the challenge may be that you need to work yourself up to be a recommender rather than a service provider. I heard a quote from an author of a book called Exactly How to Sell, I think is the name of his book. And his quote is, a salesperson is someone that has earned the right to make a recommendation. A salesperson is someone that has earned the right to make a recommendation. And when you are making a change to a modification to how you work with your customer, when you are bringing a new business model, a new way of charging, offering a new service, transforming the service, you're essentially taking the role of the salesperson that's trying to sell the customer on the idea of that we need a change, the idea that we're going to do things differently. So before you jump in and start suggesting the idea, I think you first need to build up the reputation of being a salesperson, which by definition is someone that has earned the right to make a recommendation. So I think that it's going to be impossible to make a recommendation if you don't understand somebody's needs, and it will be impossible to make a recommendation if the customer is not looking for a recommendation. So you almost have to start the conversation with, hey, let's understand if making a new recommendation is the best choice. And that's it. And assuming that you are going to walk in and make that change, you're going to charge differently. You're going to go to value pricing no matter what, and you're not going to charge by the hour anymore. Then you also have to walk in differently. I think that the first thing you should do is come in and say, by the way, we're dropping you as a client. We're not offering you this hourly service anymore. And you kind of have to start from there. And so you have to start with a clean slate, and the customer goes, hey, what happened? Well, we don't offer that service anymore. So I'm sorry, we don't offer that service anymore. And you have to take it out of the equation and they have to stop being your client for like 30 seconds. So they go, oh, wait, so I don't have an accountant now. Say, well, you can have an accountant. Let me tell you how we work. And it's hard. It's hard because you're the same person. You were just there 10 seconds ago, and you just were their accountant 10 seconds ago. You're wearing the same shirt. You didn't even have a chance to change and leave and come back. It's hard because you are the same person, but you almost need that shocking element to say, this is just not an option anymore. It's not a choice anymore. I don't charge by the hour anymore. So I don't have a service to offer you. So we either start talking about how I can serve you, or we talk about how someone else can serve you. And I think that Most of us don't walk in with that mentality, don't walk in ready to lose the client. And in that fear and reading the client that they're not liking the way this is going, I think that maybe we retract and pull back and maybe do some weird hybrid hourly value model that just doesn't work. So that would be my recommendation. And this is from my own experience is if you're going to go and implement fixed fees and value pricing, I think you have to be ready to lose your client because in one way, shape, or form, you lost by making the decision, you lost your client as you knew it. And now it's a new client, it's a new service, it's a new model, new mindset. So I'll leave you with that. And we couldn't get Kirk back on. So I'll say thank you for attending live, and I'll see you guys next week.